Early one morning in June of 2021, 55-year-old Willie Lee Smith made plans to meet with a woman he had connected with on a dating app. He thought he was going to link up with 24-year-old Cheyenne Brooks Brown in an alleyway outside her home in Flora, Indiana, for some fun. And Brooks Brown was at the meeting spot as promised, but she wasn't there alone. Lurking in the background with a baseball bat in his hands, 22-year-old Tyrone Leftridge was waiting for the right moment to attack. He waited until Smith was distracted by Brooks Brown, then approached him from behind and struck him twice in the head with the bat. After the attack, Smith stumbled into a neighbor's house covered in blood and fell on their sofa. The neighbor called the police and Willie was airlifted to the emergency room, where he died from his injuries. It didn't take police long to identify Brooks Brown and Leftridge as the prime suspects in the case. Brooks Brown told investigators that Leftridge had used her dating account app to set up the meeting. She claimed that she thought she was supposed to sleep with Smith for money, acting as if she had no idea that Leftridge was going to attack the victim. In a further attempt to distance herself from the crime as much as possible, Brooks Brown said that she ran over to a neighbor's house when the assault began, and that Leftridge showed up a short while later with the victim's wallet, money, and cell phone. Leftridge admitted that he planned to rob Smith, but claimed that he was attacked by a stranger when he went to commit the crime. In a jailhouse phone call the next day, he told a friend that he struck Smith because the victim had a knife, even though investigators believe that the victim was unarmed at the time of his murder. In the meantime, Brooks Brown admitted that Smith was respectful toward her and didn't do anything to warrant a violent reaction. The suspect's housemate, Jennifer Dean, was accused of providing the bat that was used to beat Smith in exchange for a $20 cut of the robbery proceeds. When Leftridge and Brooks Brown returned to the residence, Brooks Brown told Dean to call the cops because a man got hurt, but Dean reportedly refused and told her co-conspirators to clean up and destroy evidence. Leftridge, Brooks Brown, and Dean were all charged with murder. Records show that Leftridge was convicted of the charge and is serving a 45-year sentence, while Dean was also found guilty of murder and was sentenced to 60 years. The outcome of the case for Brooks Brown is unclear. Number 8. Alicia Fernando. Australian teenager Alicia Fernando and a companion met 19-year-old Luke Delphin for the first time in June of 2017. He and a male friend picked them up in a car, which later turned out to be stolen, and they went to a house party in Narre Warren in Melbourne's southeast. While at the address, Delphin bought 20 milliliters of GHB. The group then headed to his Dandenong apartment where they smoked cannabis and took GHB from a shared plunger. As the night went on, Fernando repeatedly accepted Delphin's offers of more of the drug and ended up taking a much larger dose than the others. She was at the time in her teens, but Delphin believed she was older and wanted to have relations with her. That didn't come to pass as they both eventually fell asleep on a mattress on the floor. After she was sent Snapchats of the previous night, a friend of Fernando's became concerned and went to the address the following morning to check on her. She found the girl face down on the mattress, unresponsive. She was pale and her lips were blue. The friend called Fernando's mother, but by the time that the woman got to the scene, her daughter was already cold to the touch. Fernando was rushed to Monash Hospital where she was pronounced dead. The police tracked Delphin down in the aftermath and he punched an officer before he was brought under control and taken into custody. A search of his apartment produced a knife and a tomahawk. Delphin pleaded guilty to multiple charges that included possession of the aforementioned weapons, supplying a child with an illicit drug, car theft, and resisting arrest. In October of 2018, he was jailed for 3.5 years with a minimum of 2 years behind bars. Number 7. Ksenia Katgena. In October of 2019, Russian woman Ksenia Katgena left her home in Verkhnaya Pishma to meet a woman who'd expressed an interest in buying the Audi Q5 she'd put up for sale online. 27-year-old Katgena was hoping to sell the car for close to $13,000 and use the money towards buying an apartment where she could raise her 9-year-old daughter. The woman who'd contacted her claimed that she was pregnant and unable to travel. So, Katgena agreed to drive out to meet her. Upon arriving at the rendezvous spot, Katgena was ambushed and knifed to death by 2 thugs. Her body was dumped in a sewer in the Ordzhonikidze district of Yekaterinburg. The gang stole the Audi and then sold it to a second-hand car dealer. The woman who'd lured Katgena to her death bore a physical resemblance to her. She used the victim's stolen passport to make the sale of the pilfered vehicle appear legitimate. As soon as he saw reports of Katgena's death in the news, the buyer contacted the authorities. The woman who'd impersonated her was arrested alongside two men, Marat Ahmedvaliev and Mikhail Fedorovich. The former was seen in a video leading the police to the spot where the gang had dumped Katgena's body. Her death was the latest in a concerning trend of criminal gangs using private car deals to lure, kill, and rob women. Local authorities entertained the possibility that a single serial killer gang was behind the attacks and looked for a connection between them. In September of 2019, cryptocurrency trader Natalia Ustinova dropped off her children at school in Novosibirsk and then took a taxi to meet a car seller. Ustinova was murdered and robbed of the large sum of cash she'd brought with her. The 36-year-old's disfigured body was found 3 weeks later near the address where she'd gone for the private deal. No arrests were made. Earlier in 2019, Irina Sinelnikova was killed after she'd driven to meet a potential buyer for her Peugeot 407. The woman was first given an electric shock before she was fatally strangled, and the attackers were captured on CCTV, driving away in her car. Stanislav Belousov and Dmitry Fursov were arrested and charged with murder in connection to the attack on Sinelnikova. In the aftermath of the three violent deaths, authorities advised car buyers and sellers to use reputable dealers or otherwise choose public places with CCTV surveillance and never go alone to a meetup spot. Number 6. Haley Lorenzen. In November of 2018, Haley Lorenzen traveled across the US from Oregon to Pennsylvania to be with a man whom she'd met online. About a month later, the man in question, 31-year-old Philip Walters, called the police to report her missing. As the authorities launched a search for 24-year-old Lorenzen, they were contacted by a woman named Gable Bell, who claimed that she'd been dating Walters at the same time. Bell said that she'd seen Lorenzen's dead body in the bathroom of Walters' Falls home. She alleged that the man had killed her by strangulation and by bashing her head in with a hammer. Bell also detailed that she'd helped Walters clean Lorenzen's blood before they took the body to Falls Bridge, tied rocks to it, and dumped it in the Susquehanna River. Walters was arrested for criminal homicide in early January of 2019, but he pleaded not guilty. In April, he told reporters, "I'm innocent. That's it." The authorities carried out extensive searches for Lorenzen's remains, but they all proved fruitless. Her body was eventually found 6 months after she was killed, on July the 20th of 2019, by a man who'd gone for a walk along the river in Plymouth. Her clothing matched what she was reported to have been wearing in December, and a bag, believed to have been previously filled with rocks, was tied to her arm. A forensic expert who'd performed Lorenzen's autopsy testified during Walters' trial that she died via strangulation. The man was found guilty of first-degree murder, third-degree murder, strangulation, and abuse of a corpse. In October of 2020, he was sentenced to life without parole. According to updates from September of 2024, the Supreme Court ordered a new trial for Walters, following an appeal that focused on the testimony of the forensic pathologist. Dr. Gary Ross had ruled that the cause of Lorenzen's death was strangulation by history. Supreme Court justices ruled in favor of a new trial after concluding that Ross's expert opinion was inadmissible because it was not offered within a reasonable degree of medical certainty. Number 5. Lorraine Cox. Englishwoman Lorraine Cox was severely inebriated in the early hours of September the 1st of 2020. As she was walking home from a night out with friends in Exeter, she was approached by Azam Mangori, and they were subsequently captured walking together on CCTV. The two reportedly had an intimate encounter in an alley, which 25-year-old Mangori recorded on his phone. They then returned to his apartment and had relations again. What followed was unclear, but Cox was never seen alive again. Over the 8 days that followed, Mangori, a refused asylum seeker from Iraq, liable for deportation, kept her lifeless body in his room. He talked to friends online and made videos of himself vaping and listening to music while Cox's body was only a few feet away on his bed. The man used Cox's SIM card and impersonated her on a number of social media platforms as he tried to convince her loved ones that she was still alive. The attempt failed and the woman's family reported her missing. Mangori bought the necessary equipment from nearby shops and set about dismembering the 32-year-old's body. He disposed of her plastic-wrapped remains in woodland and bins near his home before he was eventually discovered by detectives and arrested on September the 8th. During the trial that followed, Mangori claimed that he blacked out after inhaling drugs with Cox and that he found her dead on the floor when he regained his senses. He maintained that panic had driven him to conceal her death and told the court, "I just remember waking up like it was a nightmare. I just freaked out when I saw her." Mangori also claimed he had no memory of cutting up Cox's body. A pathologist couldn't determine the cause of death due to the length of time elapsed between her passing and her remains being recovered. A toxicology report found no evidence of drugs in Cox's system, nor any indication that the type 1 diabetes sufferer had succumbed to a medical emergency. Prosecutors argued that Mangori took advantage of the fact that she was incapacitated by alcohol and suffocated her to death by stuffing her t-shirt tightly in her mouth. There was no indication that he'd acted out of mental turmoil in the aftermath. One piece of evidence in that regard was that he listened to music and made videos near her body. Moreover, he'd dismembered her using the surgical technique of disarticulation, which forensic experts described as a measured act and not one done with panic. Mangori was found guilty of murder after a 4-week trial and sentenced to life with a minimum custodial term of 20 years. Number 4. Anastasia Patricia Rubinska. In the summer of 2023, Polish woman Anastasia Patricia Rubinska was working as a waitress at a 5-star hotel in Marmari on the Greek island of Kos. On June the 12th, she went to a party. At around 11 p.m., she called her Polish boyfriend to say that she drank too much and that she would catch a ride on a motorbike to go meet him. She never made it back, and the 28-year-old man called the police to report her missing. On June the 18th, Rubinska's naked body was found under a tree in the Alkis Tigaki wetlands area. The 27-year-old's remains were covered with branches and she was halfway inside a black plastic bag. Local police records indicated that the victim was tortured and abused before she was fatally strangled. She suffered for 45 minutes leading up to her death, and her fingers had been cut off in an effort to erase her prints and make it more difficult to identify the body. The investigation resulted in the arrest of Rahim Abdul, a 32-year-old man from Bangladesh. He lived less than a mile from where the young woman's remains were found and was the last person to have been seen with her. Rubinska's DNA and hair were found in his room, along with 2 knives, a stained yellow sweater, and a plane ticket to Italy that Abdul had purchased in the aftermath of the woman's disappearance. He admitted that he'd brought Rubinska to his home on June the 12th and that they'd had relations, but claimed to have dropped her off later on. Surveillance footage didn't confirm his claim. Moreover, the man had scratch marks on his face and hands that indicated he'd been involved in a struggle. Investigators believed that Abdul had offered Rubinska a ride but then kidnapped her, forced himself on her and killed her. Number 3. Dian Willoughby. In July of 2020, Jose Nunez left his home in Bridgeport, Connecticut, to meet up and have intimate relations with 19-year-old Dian Willoughby, a man to whom he'd been talking on Snapchat. Nunez never returned home. On July the 29th, a day after his mother had reported him missing, his body was found in a wooded area in Oxford. Willoughby confessed to a friend that he'd killed Nunez, and the friend alerted the authorities. Following Willoughby's arrest, it emerged that he'd initially tried to smother Nunez with a bleach-soaked rag, believing it would have the same effect as chloroform. When that didn't work, he strangled him to death with his bare hands. Willoughby was charged with murder under special circumstances, which carried a possible sentence of life without parole. In December of 2021, under a plea deal, he admitted the lesser charge of murder. Willoughby had a long history of mental illness and had reportedly been hearing voices telling him to act out violently since he was 10 years old. He was hospitalized 4 times due to his mental health issues. At the time of the murder, he was working as a loss prevention officer and aspired to one day become a police officer. According to Willoughby's lawyer, his client saw a threat from the victim to his job, which was the only good thing in his life. Nunez was in his early teens when they had relations, and he'd allegedly threatened to expose Willoughby as a predator unless he was paid off. Willoughby consequently lost control and fatally attacked him. He was ultimately sentenced to 40 years behind bars. Today's topic was requested by Puddin Tane 4364, River Parish, and Sean Delap 8587. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Denise Williams. In April of 2021, Pennsylvania woman Denise Williams, aged 54, decided to buy a new fridge as a gift for her boyfriend. She went to Facebook Marketplace and found a fridge listed by 26-year-old Joshua Gorgon. They arranged to meet up at his Guystown apartment on April the 5th. While there, they argued over how much the fridge would cost, and the dispute escalated into a physical altercation. Williams tried to put up a fight, but Gorgon relentlessly stabbed her with a kitchen knife, inflicting 68 separate wounds. After killing Williams, the man wrapped her body in a comforter and left it in his bathroom. Gorgon then drove off in her Chevrolet Trax and abandoned it in Richland Township. Law enforcement found the SUV around the same time that Williams was reported missing by her family. The vehicle had fresh blood on the door, as well as an ATM withdrawal receipt from a Johnstown bank and a small bag of cocaine inside. It subsequently emerged that the drugs belonged to Gorgon and that he'd bought them with money he'd stolen from the victim using cell phone data and the Facebook account provided by her family. The authorities tracked Williams' movements to his home. They gained access with the help of a landlord and found her body. Following his arrest, Gorgon admitted that the sale went south and that he'd knifed the woman to death, but claimed to have done so in self-defense after she'd attacked him first. In September of 2022, he was found guilty of first-degree murder, robbery, theft, and possession of drug paraphernalia. He was sentenced to life without parole on the first offense and an additional 102 to 288 months on the other charges. If these strangers being complete weirdos wasn't enough for you, stick around till after number 1 to catch our previous release of When Crappy Cops Go Wrong. Coming right up. Number 1. Tim Smith. On the evening of March the 16th of 2017, Tim Smith drove to meet 20-year-old Mark Law and his teenage friend, Mason Casey, in Shepshed, Leicestershire, England. The youths had been talking to Smith on the Badoo dating app and had lured the 45-year-old with the proposition of having intimate relations with him. After Smith picked them up, Law and Casey directed him to a car park near Gelders Hall Industrial Estate. Less than 2 minutes after they'd pulled up, the youths were seen on CCTV running away from the scene. Law had plunged a knife into Smith's chest, piercing his heart. Although he was critically injured, the man was able to reverse his vehicle. He tried to drive off, but crashed into a wall and passed out. Law and Casey had planned to kill Smith and dump his body in a storm drain, but the plot faltered after the crash attracted the attention of people nearby. Police initially attended the scene, following reports of a traffic collision before they came upon the injured man. In spite of receiving open-heart surgery in the back of an ambulance, Smith was pronounced dead. The motive for the killing was believed to have been connected to the youth's grim fascination with murder and cannibalism. They'd tried to entice another stranger with the promise of a three-way on March the 13th, but he never showed up to meet them. Law pleaded guilty to murder in September of 2017 and was jailed for life with a minimum term of 20 years. Casey was sentenced to spend at least 15 years behind bars for the same offense. A married Pennsylvania State Police trooper was accused of abusing his authority when he forcibly arrested his ex-girlfriend, Mistress, in August of 2023. 37-year-old Ronald Keith Davis is married and was living with his family in Dauphin County, while his mistress, 37-year-old Michelle Pafanov, was living at a trailer he owned. After a 4-month romance, their relationship disintegrated. Out of spite, Davis obtained a petition to have her involuntarily committed to a mental institution. On August the 21st, he was caught on video, arresting her after chasing her down. Davis allegedly sat on Pafanov, lay on her, and grabbed her by the legs throughout. In the aftermath, the woman was taken to the hospital, and doctors determined that she wasn't mentally unstable at all. On September the 21st of 2023, Davis was arrested. He was facing several charges, including felony strangulation, unlawful restraint, false imprisonment, simple assault, recklessly endangering another person, and official oppression. Prosecutors said that Davis was held in Dauphin County Prison without bail. Things are probably not looking good for his 9-year career with the force. Number 10. Morito Garcia. 34-year-old New Jersey man Morito Garcia was found asleep inside his vehicle by Secaucus police shortly after 3 a.m. on July the 2nd of 2023. His car was stopped in the left-hand turn traffic lane at the intersection of Secaucus Road and County Avenue. Garcia was apparently unaware that he'd fallen asleep behind the wheel. When he was asked if he knew where he was, he responded, "By Hoboken," which was a few miles away from Secaucus. Apparently, he was also having trouble answering simple questions slurring his words and eventually struggling with a field sobriety test. He also admitted to having had a couple of drinks and said that he worked for the Union City Police Department. The Secaucus police officer then told him that he might be looking for some kind of preference and asked him why he would even bring that up without being asked. Ultimately, Garces was arrested and charged with driving while under the influence and reckless driving. Records indicated that this was his second DWI arrest. Subsequent information indicated that he pleaded not guilty to charges on August the 1st. Number 9. Kenneth Booth Jr. In Orange Beach, Alabama, 28-year-old Deputy Kenneth Booth Jr. from the Cullman County Sheriff's Office allegedly killed a colleague whom he was dating. The incident took place during their beach getaway at the Seaside Beach and Racket Club. According to authorities, Booth killed 23-year-old shift supervisor Lexi White on September the 7th of 2023 during an argument that stemmed from unknown reasons. The argument reportedly escalated to the point where Booth eventually pulled out a weapon and shot White. Officials said that later Booth was also found dead. Sheriff Matt Gentry said that everyone in his department was devastated by the shocking incident. Number 8. Jonathan Miroff. A video of an off-duty officer from the Chicago Police Department in Illinois berating law enforcement during a traffic stop went viral in 2021. Jonathan Miroff was pulled over in July of 2021. CPD body camera footage revealed that Miroff was belligerent, yelling profanities throughout the duration of the traffic stop. It was unclear why he was pulled over. Records indicated that he wasn't arrested that night. However, on November the 27th of the subsequent year, he was arrested. A Harrison District Tactical Unit saw Miroff's Acura MDX run 2 red lights in the 400 and 500 blocks of South Costner in Chicago at around 8 p.m. on the aforementioned date. When they tried to conduct a traffic stop, the vehicle allegedly sped off. Law enforcement gave chase and eventually caught Miroff when he abruptly stopped in the middle of traffic near Independence Boulevard. Miroff informed them that he was a police officer. According to the police report, a supervisor let him drive to the Harrison District Station, where he was arrested. He was charged with misdemeanor fleeing and eluding and misdemeanor reckless conduct. Additionally, he was given 4 traffic citations. Miroff's vehicle was impounded and his off-duty weapon was seized. In the aftermath, he was stripped of police powers pending an internal investigation. Number 7. Ana Alicia Perez. 2 Florida women were charged with battery for allegedly beating up a man they were both dating. After 34-year-old Ana Alicia Perez and 35-year-old Mila Zuluaga learned they were both in a relationship with the same man, they confronted him shortly before 1 a.m. on May the 26th of 2023. The furious pair showed up at Miller's Ale House in Palmetto Bay, where a verbal dispute between them and the man ensued. Fox News reported that the altercation quickly escalated into a public smackdown. Perez and Zuluaga reportedly struck the man multiple times, leaving him with redness to the face and a small bruise to the lower lip. According to the police, the women were arrested on 1 count each of battery. Zuluaga was taken to the Miami-Dade Police Department's Special Victims Bureau, while Perez was processed and transported to the Turner Guilford Night Correctional Center. Investigators said that Perez thought she was in a monogamous relationship with the man, whose name wasn't released. At the same time, Zuluaga lived with the victim and was pregnant with his child. It was unclear how they discovered the man's alleged infidelity. Perez, who was an officer with the Miami-Dade Police Department, was suspended with pay pending the outcome of the investigation. The department's director, Freddie Ramirez, issued a statement saying that although Perez was off duty, her behavior was unacceptable. Ramirez stated further that he was disappointed by the officer's actions. Number 6. David Hall Dixon. On April the 7th of 2021, 2 gunshot victims were driven by their friend to Prince George's Hospital Center in Cheverly, Maryland. According to police, the 2 victims, 38-year-old James Johnson and 32-year-old Dominique Williams, succumbed to wounds in their rear upper torso 2 days later, Pentagon Force Protection Agency officer David Hall Dixon claimed that Williams, Johnson, and 36-year-old Michael Thomas had attempted to break into cars in his condo parking lot in Tacoma Park. He told investigators that he engaged the trio and opened fire at them when they fled the scene. Surveillance video from the apartment complex showed Dixon, who was off duty at the time, firing into a vehicle as it drove away. He was arrested 2 days after the incident and charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of using a handgun, and reckless endangerment. He was also facing charges of second-degree murder and using a handgun in the commission of a felony in the assault against 36-year-old Michael Thomas, who police said was the driver of the vehicle Dixon shot up. Investigators later revealed that Dixon's overview of events was inconsistent with the facts in the case and that he had no lawful reason to fatally shoot Williams and Johnson. Tacoma Park Police Chief Antonio Duvall stated. Duvall added that his department had no intention of charging the surviving victim, Thomas, with any crimes. Dixon was booked into the Montgomery County Detention Center without bond and was eventually terminated from his job. As of the latest updates, Dixon pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of first-degree assault on September the 14th of 2023. For accepting a plea deal, the 42-year-old might face up to 30 years behind bars. Number 5. Justin Shields. Shortly before 1 a.m. on April the 14th of 2023, 25-year-old Justin Shields was pulled over by an Ohio State Highway Patrol trooper for speeding on Interstate 275. As the trooper approached the vehicle, Shields rolled down his driver's side window, handed the trooper his license, and then quickly showed the trooper his Cincinnati Police Department badge. The trooper then asked him how much he had to drink, to which Shields responded that he didn't. At the time, the vehicle Shields was driving had expired tags. When the trooper questioned him about it, he raised his voice saying, "I showed you my badge." The trooper then proceeded to give him field sobriety tests. Shields insisted several times throughout his interaction with the trooper that he had had nothing to drink, but he refused the breathalyzer test. After the field sobriety tests, he was arrested for operating a vehicle under the influence. Despite repeatedly insisting he hadn't consumed alcohol, he accidentally admitted that he did when questioned by the trooper one last time. On May the 17th, he pleaded guilty to an amended and lesser charge of physical control while under the influence. According to sentencing documents, Shields was ordered to serve 3 days in a driver's intervention program, 16 hours of community service and 3 years of probation. His license was also suspended for up to 1 year, though he'll be able to drive for his job, medical needs, attending his mandated driving program, and to get groceries on Sundays. Number 4. Colin Snider. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department were called to the Northwest Valley neighborhood near Buffalo Drive and Regatta Drive at around 2 p.m. on May the 19th of 2022. A dispatcher received a report of a Nevada man who was allegedly impersonated an officer and pointed a gun at a woman. When officers arrived, they only found the woman. She then claimed that while she was driving, a man in a truck following behind her was driving in an angry, deranged, and aggressive manner, revving loudly. The woman said she got scared, so she slammed on her brakes and got out of the vehicle to confront the driver. The man subsequently parked in the middle of the street and appeared to be wearing a police vest. He then reportedly pointed a gun at her, causing her to scream and run to a neighbor's house. The man was later identified as 32-year-old Colin Snider, who was a local police officer and was off duty at the time. According to law enforcement, a warrant for his arrest was issued on June the 1st. Records show that Snider turned himself in and appeared in court the following day. He claimed that the woman almost hit him head on, so he turned his vehicle around to confront her. Snider was booked into the Clark County Detention Center on 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon and 1 count of oppression under the color of law. While the investigation continued, he was suspended without pay. Number 3. Salvador Alejandro Sanchez. A federal jury awarded $17 million to the parents of a California man killed by an off-duty Los Angeles Police Department officer at a warehouse store in Corona. The ordeal occurred on the evening of June the 14th of 2019 inside the Costco on McKinley Street, where 32-year-old Kenneth French was shopping with his parents Russell and Paula French. The off-duty officer, Salvador Alejandro Sanchez, was standing near a sausage sample table in the store when Kenneth suddenly shoved him from behind. Authorities said Sanchez was holding his toddler son in his arms when he was knocked to the ground. Reportedly, he then pulled his pistol, causing Russell to shout out, "Don't shoot! My son is sick!" Nevertheless, Sanchez opened fire, killing Kenneth and seriously wounding his parents. The family filed a civil suit against Sanchez, the LAPD, and the City of Los Angeles at the end of 2019, alleging battery, negligence, civil rights violations, and both intentional and negligent infliction of emotional distress. Russell and Paula said that their son had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Sanchez was later fired after the city's Civilian Board of Police Commissioners determined that Kenneth's conduct didn't present an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury. On October the 27th of 2021, in the lawsuit filed against the city of LA, the federal jury concluded that Sanchez was acting within the scope of his employment, even though he was off duty at the time. That meant that the city might be liable for much of the rewarded sum. In August of 2022, the California Attorney General charged Sanchez with voluntary manslaughter and assault with a semi-automatic firearm. The 33-year-old is free on a $155,000 bond while awaiting his trial, which is set to begin sometime in late 2023. Number 2. Drew Scott Romo. While being arrested on November the 14th of 2020, California man Drew Scott Romo, who was an officer at the Roseville Police Department, was told he was a disrespect to the law enforcement profession. On that evening, Romo was reportedly removed from a bar on Saddlebag Trail in Scottsdale, Arizona, after a night of partying with friends which had caused him to be overly intoxicated. He subsequently crossed the street and attempted to enter another bar, but was denied entry because of his inebriated state. Apparently, Romo became aggressive and confrontational, screaming at the bar's security personnel and passers-by. When he refused to leave, Scottsdale police were called to the scene. Responding officers explained to Romo that establishments were obligated by law to remove him because he was too intoxicated. When Romo was placed in handcuffs, he said he wanted to go home. He continued being belligerent, telling them he had a law enforcement ID, seemingly thinking he'd get away with his misconduct. One of the officers told him that he was a disgrace. Upon the lieutenant's arrival, Romo's demeanor changed as the volume of his voice toned down. Ultimately, he was arrested on charges of assault and disorderly conduct. Records indicated that Romo's employment with the Rosedale Police Department ended 4 days after his arrest. On March 23, 2021, Romo pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct. The assault charge was dismissed, and he was fined a total of $650. Number 1. Anthony Armbruster. On July the 14th of 2023, an off-duty Ohio police officer was found asleep inside his vehicle along Township Avenue in Cincinnati. St. Bernard police received a report about the man and were called to the location. Responding officers found the man, identified as 28-year-old Anthony Armbruster, slumped behind the wheel of the car. According to responding officers, the 28-year-old had a lingering odor. Armbruster, who was an Elmwood Place police officer, claimed that he wasn't going to work in the morning. Reportedly, he was given multiple sobriety tests, during one of which he lost balance. After failing the sobriety tests and refusing to take a breathalyzer, he was taken into custody for allegedly driving under the influence. After the arrest, Armbruster turned in his equipment and resigned, according to the Elmwood Place Police Department. During his arraignment, he pleaded not guilty, and his driver's license was suspended. Court records indicated that this wasn't Armbruster's first time being accused of a crime. In 2022, he was convicted of 2 counts of endangering the welfare of his children after they were found with bruises and abrasions on them. He was only sentenced to probation. Nearly 2 months after his DUI arrest, Armbruster was again arrested for being intoxicated and disorderly
in Green Township. A criminal complaint stated that he had a heated argument with his mother and brother in a parking lot, during which he allegedly threw his brother to the ground. Armbruster was charged with disorderly conduct and was released the following day on his own recognizance. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have perfect recall or be able to see through walls? Let us know in the comments section below.